Hey guys, I have a question for you. How do you spread abundance? This year, Joe and I are spreading even more abundance by giving out insights on money, wealth strategies, and resources in our current newsletter, Creating Abundance in 52 Weeks, that we want to share with you for free. So sign up right now as you're listening to this episode on our website at www.abundantculture.co. That's .co/newsletter. www.abundantculture.co/newsletter. Don't let delay get in the way of your abundant year. Now, back to the episode. Welcome back to Abundant Culture Podcast,
where we dissect the mindsets and tactics of the true beasts of business.
People like Gary Vee, Grant Cardone, and Warren Buffett.
All to create a blueprint to experience life more abundantly. Hey everybody, Joe here. Welcome back to the Abundant Culture Podcast. We're so glad to have you back again this week. And today we're going to be talking to the author of The Entrepreneur's Guide to Financial Wellbeing. He's going to be talking with us about a bunch of different topics, the difference between a fiduciary and an average financial advisor, what a fiduciary is, how to vet them, and how to utilize them in order to better your financial well-being. So get ready to listen to and learn from our very, very good friend, Wayne Titus.
Hi, Wayne, and thank you again for coming onto the Abundant Culture Podcast. We are super excited to have you today because I think you're like the first fiduciary that we're actually talking to on the podcast. So that's pretty cool. But before we get into like all the financial side of things, we have to ask you, what is your story? Like, how did you get into business and why?
Sure. Well, first off, thanks so much for having me on your podcast, and I'm honored to be the first fiduciary on here. So, well, my story, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My dad was a car dealer. He had boat dealerships in Florida. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. My great grandfather was a farmer, and I consider farmers to be entrepreneurs. And he used to grow potatoes. So we've gone from entrepreneurial experience of growing potatoes to growing portfolios. My business integrates tax, financial, and investment strategy for families and small businesses. We mostly focus on entrepreneurs. And my experience before I started my businesses in 2002 is really related to working with my dad in his business, and then going back and picking up a business degree. I saw my dad get some bad business advice from his CPA. And I thought, if that jerk can be a CPA, so can I. Right. And that's actually how I got started in the accounting world. And my wife said, "You hate accounting." I knew her in college. And I said, "Yeah, but I think this time it'll be different." And it was, right? Accounting is kind of the language of business. I'm not super passionate about the accounting aspect of things, but I'm passionate about business. And consequently, I'm probably not your stereotypical accountant, with the eye shades and the garters on the sleeves and that kind of stuff. I'm somebody that's involved in integrating, different aspects of finance, tax, and accounting with business.
Awesome.
That's really cool. And honestly, I don't meet a lot of people who integrate all of those things together. Like usually there's somebody who just deals with investment, there's somebody who does accounting, and there's somebody who's kind of like a business advisor, but you rarely ever meet somebody who's all of those things. And I know a question that a lot of our listeners and viewers might be wondering right now is, we explained that you were a fiduciary, but we didn't necessarily explain what a fiduciary is. So if you could shed a little light on what a fiduciary is and what those job duties are, I think that would be very, very great.
Sure. Well, in the legal world or the investment world, there's a duty called the fiduciary duty, and basically, to put it in the most simplest terms, you have a duty of loyalty to your client. You have to be thinking about what's in the client's best interest. You can't be thinking about your wallet. So no matter what, you have to make the decision that's right for your client. And provide the advice that's right for your client. The problem is, when you get involved in the investment world, there's advisors out there that split their duty. And so sometimes they're fiduciaries in a very narrow sense, and they say that they're a fiduciary, but they're not a fiduciary in the broad sense, only in giving advice as it relates to allocation of portfolio, how you should be allocated. But as soon as they start to, talk about a product or recommend a product, they change. It's like they change the hat from the fiduciary hat to the suitability hat. In my book, I go into quite a bit of detail on this, but the long and the short of it is, I think as a consumer, the most important thing is to understand, is your advisor a fiduciary? And the way you can tell is if you ask them to put it into writing, are you a fiduciary? And will you be a fiduciary in all aspects of recommendations to me, when you recommend products or when you give me advice on allocation? If they say yes, you've got a fiduciary. If they say I can't do that, but I'm a fiduciary, then maybe they're only a fiduciary in part of the duty that they have to you. It's kind of confusing, but it's important to know that that you're working with a fiduciary. Or if you're not, that you can understand that they're not necessarily going to make the recommendation that's in your best interest. You're going to have to look out on your own interest.
And what would you say is a fiduciary something that is rare or hard to find? Because honestly, I didn't even know what a fiduciary is until I think maybe 2 years ago or something like that. Yeah. I had never even heard the term before. So I guess, are these people rare? And if so, how do you kind of go about finding one that's actually suitable for you?
Yeah, I think they are. They're becoming more common, or at least there's many more people that are becoming partial fiduciaries. If there could be, some sense of that. But I think the most important thing is you can find out if you go to. There's a couple of websites that you can go to, feeonlynetwork.com or .org, I can't remember, and the other one is Paladin Registry, PALADIN registry.com. And the Paladin Registry rates advisors based on their fiduciary duty, and the Fee Only Network provides you access to only fiduciaries. So Fee Only advisor is a fiduciary through and through. A fee-based advisor is only a fiduciary when it comes to giving advice on allocation, but not on selecting products. So you can go to Fee Only Network or Paladin Registry, and you can get some more information on that.
That's really cool. That's a nice little tool I think everybody should really have in their back pocket. And when it comes to, I know that you said that you mainly work with entrepreneurs, but I guess what type of people, in your opinion, do you feel really should have a fiduciary in their corner?
I think everyone should, or at least they should be considering it. I work not just with entrepreneurs, I work with entrepreneurs and families. And the same advice that we give entrepreneurs, or much of the same advice, is very similar to what we would provide a family. A fiduciary in many ways, any advisor, when you're working with an advisor, you want somebody that's going to walk with you in this process and this journey of life. And to me, that's there's a word out there called solidarity, right? You're walking in, or journeying with someone on their journey. You're not, telling them what to do. You're actually living that journey with them. And that's what we look for kind of when working with our clients, is we want to be involved so that we can be impactful in people's lives. And that can only happen if you have a long-term relationship. It's not something that you can do overnight to change somebody's life. We want to be impactful when we work with families and with small businesses. And so we design our process and the way we communicate so that we can have that long-term relationship. And that's what people, I think, should be looking for. And usually that comes in a fiduciary package.
Awesome.
What's the process like when you become a fiduciary? Like when someone is looking for a fiduciary, does that person have like a specific license, or what other things should they be looking for outside of them, signing that they're going to be a fiduciary in all aspects?
Yeah, they can look for registered investment advisory firms. If they look for a registered investment advisory firm that is not affiliated with a broker dealer, usually they're going to find a fiduciary that's fiduciary when they recommend product and when they give advice on allocation. If they find that they're actually doing business with two businesses, basically the brokerage firm and the investment advisory firm. You can tell usually when you walk into somebody's office, next to the door or on the window, it'll say member of SIPC or a number of different types of other designations. That's a clue that maybe somebody's there selling products. If they're selling insurance, then they're probably not giving you fiduciary advice as it relates to insurance, because most insurance products, you receive a commission. So if your advisor is receiving a commission on a product that they're selling, they're not a fiduciary when they sell that product to you. They're making a recommendation, but it's not a fiduciary recommendation.
Didn't know that. That's very interesting.
So you can just put your other hat on, like, yes, I'm just going to be your insurance agent right now. I'm not your fiduciary right now. That was the other Jasmine.
Wouldn't it be so much easier if they had to wear hats? One that says I'm a fiduciary, and then they take it off, and then they put on their sales hat. And they sell it. It's called the Suitability Standard, and it makes it sound like it, that the product that they're selling is suitable for you. So it's supposed to be in line with your risk tolerance, but it doesn't mean that's in your best interest. And this is where the confusion is. And I'm sorry it's so complicated, but the financial services lobby has made this a very difficult thing for people to understand.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what's your take on that? Because I don't know if you remember if I even really told you my story, but one of the things that happened to me when I was really young is I wanted to learn about money because I had never been taught anything about money. And now I'm a young adult, have no clue what's going on, going broke by the minute. And I'm like, okay, what's this money thing about? Because evidently I'm not good at it. Why do you think it is so complicated to understand these different things? And what's your feelings behind that? Because I feel like, I have a decent understanding and compared to a lot of people, but there's still so much I don't know. And I know if that's the case for me, I know that's definitely the case for a lot of other people as well.
Yeah. Well, right now, one of the ways I give back to my community is I'm the chair in Michigan of the Financial Literacy Task Force for the Michigan Association of CPAs. And one of the things that we find in our experience is that there's a lot of people out there that don't know and understand just even the basics about finance and how it works. And this is a problem that starts early on because adults don't have a good understanding of it. Yeah. Before you can become literate in something, you have to know and understand or learn basic concepts. Yeah. And those concepts are taught in schools sometimes, but not everywhere. And they're not emphasized maybe the way they need to be, not just at school, but at home. Mm-hmm. And if you have adults that don't know how to do it, it's like this cycle, right? You can't get out of this cycle if you don't know what the language is.
Right.
You can't communicate if you don't know what the language is. And so learning language, from even being a little child, you pick up things along the way because your parents teach you how to speak and how to communicate. And these are just difficult things, right? So before you can actually use finances to your benefit, you have to become financially literate. In order to become financially literate, you have to start speaking the terms and understanding the terms. And this is where I think the schools have failed in many cases. And as families, we failed to educate our kids on the importance of this. I remember my sons were going through high school and they had a life skills course. It was like one semester. They learned a bunch of different things. One of them was like how to balance their checkbook, but it didn't teach them everything that they needed to know.
Yeah.
And so it needs to be ongoing. It can't just be like a 9-week session in school where you have maybe one class or 2 classes devoted to it. This is this is how people live their lives later. So I think more time should be spent teaching people about financial literacy.
I agree, for sure.
Yeah. So when it comes to like families, because, they're within their household before they even go to school, do you have like any recommendations or like conversation starters to start becoming more financially literate as like a family unit?
I know there's a program out there, Junior Achievement, goes into a lot of schools and they try to help with financial literacy. There's volunteers that go into the schools that do that. There's materials that they have that are available to be used in the schools and for volunteer purposes. There are associations out there that do financial literacy, like the Michigan Association of CPAs. We spend a lot of time trying to develop financial literacy resources for communities. So as an example, we put together modules, for different situations. Like if you're going into college, if you're a high school junior or senior and you're looking to go to college, what does it mean to get a loan for college, and what do you need to be careful of? So I think there are resources out there. I think you have to look, you generally have to look for them. You can Google them and come up with a list of all kinds of things. But I think, it's important to put it in the context of how can you teach your kids this stuff? Like some of the local elementary schools, they run these credit union programs where the credit union sets up bank accounts for kids, and they can bring money in and they can make deposits and they can make withdrawals and they can do those kinds of things. I think that's an important aspect of financial literacy, but it's not the only one. Understanding compound interest and how debt works and how to manage debt and how to stay out of debt, and how detrimental debt can be. All those things are really important. And I think those are really the things that are underemphasized in the schools. Having the credit unions is great. Understanding that you can put money in a bank or in a credit union is fantastic. Saving and learning how to save is important. But managing debt or not having debt is a great thing too. And again, I think we underemphasize that.
Absolutely. So when it comes to really advising somebody, like let's say if you wanted to be very transparent with somebody and just tell them how they would go about finding a good fiduciary, I think finding them is one thing, but making sure that they're a right fit for you is probably another thing entirely. What would you say are some good qualities that people should look for when they're looking for fiduciary? Is it a certain license, a certain track record? Is it, something else? Is it like higher education? Like what are those qualities that you feel like a good fiduciary would definitely should have in order to serve their clients' best interest?
Yeah, I think it's important for, when you're selecting an advisor, whether it's for a small business or whether it's for your family, you want to make sure that you've got an advisor that's a good fit for you. And to me, I think the things to look for are that they aren't providing information in a silo, right? Because you can get expertise, but if it's very silo focused, it's not considering the broader aspects of how things fit together, right? Our society and our financial system is complex. And our tax system is even more complex. Like there's, I think, 6 or 7 dimensions of taxation when you start to look at our tax code. And so having a good understanding of the tax code and how finance and investment strategy works together is important. So I think understanding that you're not just engaging an advisor that's only going to give you tax advice, or only going to help you with your financial plan, or only going to help you with investment strategy. You want somebody that is well-versed in all of those things. And I'm not saying they have to be a deep expert in all of that, but they need to be able to help you coordinate it. Yeah. Most people that I know that own their businesses are not passionate about tax and accounting or about investments. That's what I'm passionate about, right? Yeah. So they want to be able to focus on what's important to them, and they want the information and the advice that's important to these other areas. And that's why I think having that, finding that person that crosses over is important. I think so look for somebody that's not silo focused, right? Mm-hmm. The second thing is look for somebody that fits your communication style. There's a great book out there by a guy named Atul Gawande. Actually, 2 books. He wrote the Checklist Manifesto, and he talks about the importance of robust processes. And the second is being mortal. It's like living your life and what it means to be mortal. And he talks about things like the different types of physicians that are out there. He named 3 of them, and I think you could take those three names and apply them in the financial industry or really any professional industry. The first is the paternalistic advisor, the one that's kind of like your mother or your father that was telling you, just do what I say and don't give me any questions, right? They just want to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
The informative advisor is helpful because they gather all the information for you, but then they dump it in front of you and they say, now you choose. Here's all the information, now you pick. They're not giving you any guidance. And then there's the interpretive advisor. And this is where I think most people would benefit from an interpretive advisor. The interpretive advisor is the one that goes out, they do all of the research, they start to filter the information based on what they know of you. So they've gotten to know you deeply and they understand what's important to you and what you're trying to achieve. And then they're filtering the information, not to keep you in the dark, but to help cut down on the amount of information that they're going to evaluate and then share with you so that you can make the decision that's right for you and your family. So I think selecting an advisor that's not silo focused and that's an interpretive kind of advisor, most families and entrepreneurs would benefit from that type of advisor.
Absolutely, for sure. So with everything going on right now, the COVID-19 pandemic, the state of the financial markets right now, what are you currently recommending to some of your clients? Like, I've been asking a couple individuals this same question, and everybody has different answers. They're like, stay in cash. Some people are saying invest. Some people are saying invest in yourself is what they're personally doing. And I guess my question is, in your opinion, what should most individuals be doing in order to protect or better their financial situations?
Well, this is the difficult thing because many of us were kind of doing business as usual. Whether you're in business or you're working for somebody else, it was business as usual. Went to work every day, you got your paycheck at the end of the week or the end of the month or whatever.
Yeah.
To wondering, how are we going to stay in business? Where's the next check going to come from? I'm laid off, I'm unemployed. This is a scary time for a lot of people.
Very.
And I think that there's no one right answer. And that's probably why you're receiving a lot of different answers. But I would recognize that there's not one right answer, but there is one right answer for you specifically.
Yeah.
And having the right advisor can help you figure out what that one specific example is. But let me give you a couple examples of what we're advising people to do. The first is understanding what your cash flow situation is. If you've had an interruption to cash flow, if you've got accounts receivable that you're waiting on collection for, if you're waiting to get benefits from the unemployment office, whatever it happens to be, know and understand what your cash flow opportunities of cash flow coming in are.
Yeah.
Also understand what are your bills that are due, when are they due, and where's that cash going to come from? Is it going to come from savings? Maybe you don't have the cash on hand. I think it's important to know what you're obligated to pay out. And then I think it's important to keep in touch with people. Don't make any promises because, you don't want to put yourself in that kind of a box, but talk to people about what your situation is and let them know the difficulties that you're facing and, see if they have any suggestions on what you might do. And again, like I said, don't make any commitment on it. I'm not an attorney. I'm not giving legal advice, but, the idea is you need to be in touch with your clients or your customers that are going to pay you or you want to pay you. And you need to be in touch with your creditors and the bills that you have to pay, and get a sense of, can something slide a little bit, or do I need to advance this more quickly than something else? Understand what your situation is. Don't put your head in the sand.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Right? Don't put your head in the sand. Make sure that you are clear about your understanding of what's going on around you. If you have the ability to look a little longer term because things are okay, then I think the important thing to also then understand is, we're experiencing something that's unusual. We've never experienced this kind of thing before. But understand, as it relates to the market is the market, and it is volatile, and it does go up and down. And the market is functioning exactly like it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
It goes up, it goes down, it goes back up, it goes back down. But the market doesn't work in a way, sometimes I think it's simplified. I saw a headline this morning that said something about the market dropped because of the jobs report. They boil it down to one simple explanation, and it's not that simple. All the information that's out there drives the market. And emotion drives the market. So when people are scared, it drives the market sometimes in ways that are downward. When news is bad, sometimes the market goes up. We don't know what the market's going to do. So I advise people, don't guess. Don't guess when the right time to get in the market is or when the right time to get out of the market is. Take a longer view of the market.
Absolutely.
It's not also what you earn in the market, and it's important to earn something, but it's what you earn after taxes. So when you make a decision to pull out of the market, you're going to incur potentially a tax implication, or you're going to put money on the sidelines that you may miss out on the next upturn. I'll give you a quick example. I had a client that sold a house, and they deposited the money in the investment account because they had made arrangements for a mortgage for the new place. And it was a pretty significant sale. And they said to us, it was March 18th, we're going to wait for the bottom. And I said, well, when is that? Well, I don't know, but I'm going to wait. The 23rd was the bottom. We talked to them last week, and they had missed a 20% increase in the market with their money on the sidelines because they were trying to guess and time the market. When you try to time things, you have to be right twice. And that's the difficult thing, right? You can sometimes hit the market once in good timing. But the bottom line is, I think people need to take for those that can, they need to take a longer view. This is a hiccup in everybody's long-term plan for most people. In the short term, it's not a hiccup. It's devastating, right? It's gut-wrenching. It's not a hiccup. But if you can take a longer view and you can afford to, I think that's the most important.
Yeah. And I really like that standpoint too, because that even kind of goes back to like a lot of Warren Buffett's ideology that he speaks about that long-term view, and how he says, if you can't watch the market dip by 50% without, panicking and selling all your assets, then you probably shouldn't be investing in those things anyway. And also, like he talks about the tax implication of selling. That's why he likes to be long term, because if he can just continue to get those that capital gain, the longer he holds on to it, the more he can wait to pay that tax bill upon selling it. So
and a
I
lot
think
of
that's
people
a really
don't
good point.
talk about paying taxes when they get out of the market. I never hear anybody talk about that.
Yeah, they never talk about it.
Well,
Never.
That's the thing, right? So taxes is the most erosive thing that we know. People are worried about like a 30% decline in taxes. Well, how about like paying 30% taxes every year, right? I mean, that's a 30% loss of your income every single year.
Yeah.
People experience that every year and they don't think twice about it. But if the market goes down 30%, they're freaking out all over the place.
Yeah.
These are the things that happen. But you don't lose. I really kind of hate people talk about, well, it was a paper loss. It's a real loss if you trigger the sale. Right? It's not a paper loss. But if you implement a strategy called rebalancing, if you're in equity, and let's just say you got 50% in equity, right? So stocks or mutual funds that hold stocks, and that market goes down 50%. And the other 50% of your portfolio is in fixed income, which is basically bonds or mutual funds that hold bonds. If the market goes down, that 50% of your portfolio might become 30%.
Yeah.
And then the bonds becomes a bigger piece of your portfolio, right? If you have a strategy that's built on a 50% equity, 50% fixed income portfolio, and equity has gone down, it causes you to say, I'm going to sell a portion of fixed income, which has gone higher in relative value, and I'm going to buy more equity at a lower relative value. What does that force you to do? It forces you to sell something high and buy something else that's low. What does everybody want to do in the market?
Buy low and sell high.
Exactly. So if you don't have an investment policy and you're not rebalancing to that investment policy, you will consistently not sell high and buy low. Rebalancing to your investment policy forces you to sell high and buy low. You're readjusting and reallocating that risk. It doesn't matter if you hit it exactly right. It just matters that you do it. Most studies show if you rebalance one time a year, that's usually enough for a long-term portfolio. Sometimes when the markets are volatile, you can rebalance more frequently. but you have to be careful of trading costs that erode the benefit of rebalancing and things like that. But I think that's the most important thing is people should consider putting in a strategy that supports their long-term objective and to rebalance periodically over that long view.
Absolutely. I love it.
Yep. So you wrote this book recently, helping entrepreneurs with their overall financial well-being. Can you talk to us a little bit about, what's in the book and why you wrote the book?
Sure. The main idea of the book is really to point out that it's critical for entrepreneurs to find a trustworthy advisor. We've talked about what is that, right? And I mean that you seek out an advisor that's interpretive and collaborative, somebody that you can depend on, that has a good business process. So we spend a lot of time in the book talking about business process and the importance of that robust business process. And I think most people don't even ask their advisors about what kind of business process they have and how do they make sure stuff doesn't fall through the cracks. I mentioned Atul Gawande's book, The Checklist Manifesto. It talks about the importance of process. When you get on an airplane, the pilot and the co-pilot are doing what as you're getting on the plane?
Checking the plane to make sure that it's operating.
Yeah, they got checklists, all kinds of checklists. And if they have an emergency, they have a checklist for that, right? This is what advisors need to have in place. They need to have checklists because Gawande is a surgeon and he's talking about the importance of having checklists with surgery. If you don't remember to take the sponge out of somebody that you're conducting surgery on, there's going to be a problem, right?
Absolutely.
And as you get involved in these integral systems inside the body and the complexity of our anatomy, it's the same thing in the financial and the tax world, right? It's complex. And as much as we might be professionals, we can't keep it all in our heads. And the people that we work with, we have to depend on them to know what they're doing too. And if we don't have checklists for them to make sure that they dot all the I's and cross all the T's, something is going to go wrong. So it's important to have a robust process. You want to have and be working with an advisor that understands the importance of that and has those systems in place. So that's what the book's about. It's basically not just for businesses. When I wrote the book, my editor said, you have to pick an audience. And I said, families and small businesses. And they said, nope, that's too large, too broad of an audience. So I said, okay, I'll write this book for entrepreneurs, but it really could be for families too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
I definitely understand that audience thing because when people ask us like who the podcast is for, it's like, well, I mean, everybody could benefit from it, but I guess if I have to say somebody, it's for entrepreneurs.
Right.
Yeah. Well, small business does drive this country, and there's so many small businesses. Some are micro businesses and some are, even the small businesses can be pretty large.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I forgot there was like an employee count for what is considered a small business. I think if you have
500 or
if you have 500 employees, you're still a small business.
Like what?
That's massive.
Yeah, exactly.
So you share so much with us, but in your opinion, what is one of the number one takeaways you would want somebody to really get from this podcast in order to better their financial situation starting today?
I think it's important to, if you're using an advisor, making sure that they're the right advisor for you. If they weren't, give you a quick example. If they didn't reach out to you during this time of struggle and pandemic, especially if you were a small business, did you get what you needed to out of that advisor? And if you didn't, you probably should be looking for somebody else to help you into the future.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right. I think as a family, if you didn't have somebody to talk to, or you tried getting a hold of your advisor and they didn't call you back, again, did you get everything out of that relationship that you needed? How did your advisors reach out to you during this time? Did they provide educational material? Did they try to help? It's hard to reach out to everybody individually, but did they reach out and do webcasts and provide those kinds of things? We did. It was very important to get information out quickly. So we couldn't call everybody, but we sent them an email and we posted webcasts with questions and had live webcasts with questions and answers on unemployment, on impacts to individuals and impacts to businesses. What did your advisor do? If you're not working with an advisor, you might consider working with an advisor. And if you're not real comfortable with finance and things related to tax, don't be discouraged by that, but find somebody that can help you through that process.
Yeah, for sure. And I can honestly say, just me seeking out the help of different people in the world of finance has completely been a game changer in my life. Like, I went from almost nothing to having businesses, employees, and a lot of stuff that I thought were just out of reach for me. So for anybody listening or watching, it's like either you have to become very comfortable with it or find somebody who already is comfortable with it and get the information from them. And I think that's the best way to go. Mm-hmm. So you're on the Abundant Culture podcast. So we feel the need to always ask this question to all our guests who come on. And it is whether it's in your business or in your personal life or in your family, how do you choose to spread abundance in your life?
Well, I think, for me, it's trying to achieve balance, right? The balance is never the same. And for me, that's, nurturing my family, giving back to my community, sharing my gifts and skills, and giving back, from the first fruits of my labor. Those are the things that I try to focus on. And as I said, the balance is kind of always shifting. If you look at our logo for our business, there's 4 pieces of the pie, right? That round circle, each piece is representing the 4 things that I just talked about. But it's hard to be perfectly in balance all the time. It's important to recognize when you're out of balance and when to pull it back. But that's what I strive to do. And that's how I try to give back in abundance, is to focus on that. If I'm doing the right things are going to happen. And we do that by serving to live. We serve to live.
That is awesome.
I love that.
Yeah.
So for the person that they think you're awesome and you're a wealth of knowledge, maybe they want to talk to you about your book, maybe they want to interview you on their podcast or whatever the case may be, how does that person get into contact with you?
Well, they can reach me through my author page, Wayne B. Titus, Titus, the number 3.com. They can also find us through my business, www.amdgservices.com, or they can find me on LinkedIn, Wayne B. Titus III, Roman numeral 3.
Awesome. Yeah, we really, really do appreciate it. I don't think we said the name of the book, and I don't want to end it without saying the book title. What's the book title again?
It's The Entrepreneur's Guide to Financial Wellbeing.
All right. So if you're listening, if you're watching, make sure you pick up The Entrepreneur's Guide to Financial
Wellbeing. Yeah. It's on Amazon or on Google Books.
Awesome. Make sure you pick that book up. And thank you so much, Wayne Titus, for coming on to the Abundant Culture podcast. You shared so much with us. You were the first fiduciary we've ever had on the podcast, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And you've given us a wealth of knowledge. We now know how to go out and find fiduciaries, how to vet those fiduciaries, and what we should look for in fiduciaries, and even overall investment strategy. So we really, really do appreciate you coming on to the podcast and teaching us all the stuff that you know.
Well, Joe and Jess, it's been my pleasure, and I really enjoyed our conversation before our podcast and during our podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So that's all we have for today, folks. I hope you got as much value out of this as we did. Keep in mind, the only way we can improve is through constructive feedback. So remember to rate and review this episode. Also, you are not the only person that needs to know this super valuable information. So be sure to subscribe and share as well. Stay tuned for the next episode. And remember to always spread abundance. Peace.